Hello and welcome to Beyond the Hello World. Today's video we will do the Conway's Game of Life in C++, and for that we're going to use the grid we did in the previous video. So let's start by creating a main function and creating a grid of chars. Here we created a grid 10 by 10 of chars. We are going to say that if a cell is alive, it's going to have the value 1, and if the cell is dead, we are going to give the value 0. Let's code a simple showGrid function and show the grid. Here in this function, we are going to display the alive defined here as being a circle if the grid contains an element that is not 0, and if 0, meaning the cell is dead, we're going to write a simple star. Let's test. Here, all cells are dead, because by default, the value is 0. We saw in the previous video that we can use an initializer function in our constructor. Let's write one that will assign a random value to one element. This function that we wrote as a lambda will evaluate a random number modulo 2 that can be equal 0 or 1. Then we will convert to a char, and it will mean that we will assign for every element in the grid a random value that can be 0 or 1. Let's test it. Okay, here we see that some cells are alive, some are dead. The proportion is almost half-half. If we want to change this proportion, we can change the modulo, instead of 2, put 3, 4, 5, or any other number. And the proportion of alive over dead will be about 1 over this number. Let's try with a bigger number. Here, actually the proportion is 1 over 10 are dead. If I want 1 over 10 are alive, I just need to put equals 0. This means that a random number modulo 10 equals 0 means that a random number is a multiple of 10. The probability is about 1 over 10. Let's do a bigger board, also a bigger grid also. Okay, now that we have a way of showing the grid, let's create a way of evolving the grid. In this function update, I will update the grid according to the rules of Conway's Game of Life. You can go to Wikipedia to see the rules, but it's if any live cell with 2 or 3 neighbors survives, any dead cell with 3 live neighbors becomes a live cell, and all the other cells die in the next generation. So we are going to code here. The update will accept the grid as a reference. It's not a const reference because we are going to actually change the elements of grid. So first of all, we'll need to copy this grid to keep a copy with the previous value, and then we can update the grid. We will need to count also the number of neighbors alive. Remember that in our previous video in the grid, we implemented a function that gets all the neighbors. We're going to use this to get all the neighbors of a certain position and count if they are alive or not. Now, if the cell is alive, we are going to apply the rules that we see in the Conway's game of life. If there is 2 or 3 neighbors, it survives, else it dies. If the cell is dead, we are going to apply the rule that if we have 3 neighbors alive, it will create a new cell. Okay, let's update the grid and test it. Okay, here we see one evolution of the grid. Now, let's do a loop and continue this evolution. We are going to use system clear to clear the screen, and we will not show one grid after the other, but we are going to show one at the place of the other. Okay, we see some kind of evolution. We can see here, it's a little bit hard to see, but we can see here a kind of oscillator we call a blinker. It was horizontal, vertical, horizontal, vertical. Let's try to see it again. Okay, it's a little bit hard, but you can see here the blinker. And we can see here also some stable, still life, the block. Okay, let's try to do something interesting. The characters, the letters we use to show alive or dead, they're not comfortable to read. We can try to change it. For example, like this. Let's test it. It's a little bit better. Now, something we can also do is that instead of using letters, we can use also colors. How do we do this? In some terminals, most of the Linux terminal and some Windows terminal, we can use what we call ANSI escape code. If you look for ANSI escape code, there is a way of writing some background color. So if I write a space with a background color, for example, a background color of black, 40, it will show a black space. And if I put 47, it will show a white space. Let's try it. Here, I'm going to put as alive the 40, that means the black. This 00 means restart the style, reset the style. And for the dead, I'll put the white. Let's try. Okay. It's a little bit better. And we can see here our blinker and the block. Now, it can be a little bit difficult to watch this blinking all the time. So what we can do is we can put some sleep. Now we sleep for 1 second and it's not blinking that much, and we can continue seeing our blinker, our block, and the other evolution. If your terminal doesn't have this capability, you can download, if you are in Windows 10, the Windows terminal. You look for Windows terminal in the store, and when you open, you will see the PowerShell. If you want, you can decrease the zoom with the scroll wheel. And here we see that we have a grid that is 100 for 400. Let's try. And if you're a little bit patient, you can see Game of Life 100 for 400 with color or black and white in this case, in your console. That's it for today. Thank you for watching. See you next video.